Homo sapiens sapiens. A significant event in the geologic record is the abrupt appearance 250,000 years ago of Homo sapiens sapiens. In a revolutionary and still controversial article, Rebecca Cann asserted that roughly 275 years ago, a single solitary woman living in the sub-Saharan Africa became the world's one common grandmother, based on restriction mapping of mitochondria DNA, which can only be passed maternally from the mother. The conclusion was of a single mother of mankind, for example, Eve. More recently, R.L. Dorrit et al. Too have found no interspecific polymorphism whatsoever in a gene paternally inherited, and concluded a date of the last common male ancestor of all humans currently on the planet to be 270,000 BCE. Michael Brown, in his book The Search for Eve, greatly expanded on these themes, tracing Eve's birthday to between 140,000 and 290,000 years ago, and the origin and spreading out of Africa of her descendants between 90,000 and 180,000 years ago. Even though the studies refer to a single man or woman in the past, they do not imply that those people were a couple or even that they were the only parents of all humans. And that's according to this particular study there. Their primary significance is in pointing to the time when anatomically modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, evolved from a more primitive ancestor generally thought to be an archaic form of Homo sapiens. Many anthropologists believe this transition happened in Africa and that the subspecies spread to other parts of the world, replacing more primitive forms of humans such as Homo erectus. Others, however, dispute the genetic evidence and argue that modern people evolved in many parts of the world as products both of the people already living there and of immigrants. Meanwhile, other authorities in Carlton, California have noted the evolution of Homo sapiens commenced approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. The Homo sapiens structure is similar to that of the Homo erectus, yet Homo sapiens skulls were slightly rounder and larger. Their teeth and jaws were noticeably smaller, which corresponds with their fragile face. The Homo sapiens brain capacity averaged an impressive 1,350 cc, surprisingly the same size of today's humans. Zechariah Sitchin has provided extensive documentation on ancient Sumerian texts and their interpretation. The massive evidence he has presented leads any open-minded individual to the almost inescapable conclusion that a group of extraterrestrials called the Anunnaki were responsible for genetic experiments circa 250,000 BCE, which transformed Homo erectus into Homo sapiens by combining the Anunnaki DNA with the DNA of the early ancestor of man. Homo sapiens is Latin for wise man. From there, presumably, man further evolved into the modern version Homo sapiens sapiens. Lawrence Gardner, in his book Genesis of the Grail Kings, has provided a detailed history of the legacy of Adam and Eve, their relation to the Sumerian Anunnaki, the patriarchs of the Old Testament, the Addams family, and the extraterrestrial connection throughout the earliest histories of the human race. His conclusions are essentially the same as Sitchin's, with the notable exception that Gardner has recognized the incredible importance of the white powder of gold, aka starfire or orm, which distinguishes the kings and patriarchs before the flood and deluge. aka the Sumerian king list and the Adams family, from other possibly lesser humans. The book of Genesis, which was written shortly after 600 BCE and likely based on the Sumerian texts, also makes it clear that mankind was created by extraterrestrial beings, which religions later identified as a single God. This singular interpretation, however, does not reconcile the fact that there may have been more than one God, a fact which is mentioned specifically in Genesis 1:26, 3:22, 6:2, and 6:4. And then it quotes the 3 verses there. A careful and open-minded reading of the first book of the Bible supports both of the thesis of Gardner and Sitchin throughout, although the Anunnaki are not specifically identified by name in the biblical texts. Nonetheless, even the Jesuits of the Catholic Church have acknowledged the logical necessity of having at least 2 gods, if not more, in the story of Genesis. The only alternative is to identify the one God as exhibiting the characteristics of schizophrenia or multiple personality syndrome. A logical question is that if mankind is the product of a genetic crossbreeding, is there any reason why the average human cannot attain a greater position of the powers and longevity of one of his parent stocks? For example, evolve to the next step. Homo sapiens, sapiens, sapiens. Offhand, I can't think of a single reason why not. This is Anne from Canada 1. Thanks for watching. I'll post a link below.